It's time for me to make my video. I've been working on Silver Sky's 1996 version the past week. What got me back into it was Independence Day Resurgence played on Sunday, and I tape recorded it, or I video recorded it off of my television, and I've been watching it in bits and pieces over the past week. It was kind of boring to me, but as I watched this, it was so boring in the beginning that I couldn't watch it all through. I found I'd switch the channel, go to the news, and I thought, you know what? You really need to finish your book novel Silver Skies so that Hollywood will have something decent. So that's what motivated me to get back to work on Silver Skies. They say that as a screenwriter, though I'm a novelist, not a screenwriter, though just about everything I write becomes a film or a movie or it goes on to television. So I kind of feel like a screenwriter. But they say that the best way to learn to be a good screenwriter is to watch both good and bad movies and then learn from both. Well, Independence Day Resurgence was like a bad movie that I learned from. Uh, the biggest problem with it had too many subplots or parallel plot lines, and it lacked a thematic focus. The theme was very weak in it. So it was slow and plodding at the beginning, and that's because there were just too many plot lines, too many. It wasn't cohesive, it wasn't integrated. So it kind of weakened the emotional impact of the screenplay. And you got to watch out for that as a screenwriter or novelist, and that is that you don't have so many plots in there that the reader gets confused and they got to think too hard to keep up with everything. And you got to make sure that, and this is where Independence Day Resurgence failed. You need to make sure that every single plot in there is tied to all the other plots. In other words, they need to have, and they all need to both resonate with the main theme of the book or the story. And in Independence Day Resurgence, it was like there were 3 or 4 plot lines where the characters' interests and goals were not connected to the interests and goals of the other characters, or they weren't connected enough, or the connections were shallow. A parallel plot is not going to work if it's not connected somehow to the main plot, and it helps to make the main plot even stronger. So that's the problem you have when you have a lot of subplots, like it did in Independence Day Resurgence. And that was, you might say, what do you think of your novel Silver Skies? Well, what I wrote in the 1990s was superior to what I wrote later. Back in the 1990s, my goal, well, I wasn't even thinking about publication. I just wanted to write one novel as a testament of my love for Brent Spiner. And so I wanted it to be professional level because I was hoping that maybe Brent could act in it. I was very naive about Hollywood back then. I actually thought that you could make it in Hollywood on the basis of the quality of your work alone and not on whether, you fit into their mold. I found out later anyways. But I continued writing the book because I wanted Brent to be proud of me and how he inspired me to be a writer and how I was evolving as a writer. So I was actually learning the craft very good, and my draft in the 1990s, my characterization was very strong. I really spent a lot of time getting to know my characters and what made them tick, their deepest thoughts, their dreams, and it showed on the page and in the dialogue. But then when I found out about Laurie McBride, I got writer's block from about 1997 to about 2010. And the book was superb up until the point where I stopped writing on it. I just quit working on it. So I'd say, I only got about 3/4 of the way in. Now, the book is super duper long. It's a big book, kind of like Gone with the Wind or The Thornbirds. It's a big book, but I stopped at 3/4 of the way in, kind of like with the bad guy, according to Save the Cat, like the bad guy's close-in section. And, some people were dying off, and I had it where it looked like Brianna and Dor were going to get together. And then I had them all of a sudden get raptured. Now that does not work. Let me tell you why it doesn't work. That's what you call Deus Ex Machina. You may say, why did you do that? I did that because even though I was only 3/4 of the way through, Steven Spielberg still made a movie, and I wanted to give him some basis for his ending. Fortunately for me, the pretty shoddy ending that I came up with, I think he elaborated on it and made it work. And it was short but a pretty good ending, but it needed to be drawn out. There were a lot of loose ends, a lot of stuff in the earlier story that needed to be tied up, needed to be some closure, and I didn't do that. So it kind of made the book fall flat because the ending was horrible. And also, when I went through it and did editing, I made it worse. I had a very strong voice, and I correctly noted, see, when I first wrote it, I was trying to write in third person limited point of view, which means you don't want to get outside of the experiences of the character in each scene. In omniscient voice or God's eye voice, the author will insert their opinion or their own observations over the characters, and usually that is not a good idea unless you're writing like an event story, which is a story about a disorder where maybe going off on a philosophical authorial opinion might work. But generally, if you want to maintain reader interest and have the reader identify with your characters, you don't want to get outside of their point of view, because by allowing the reader to go through the story through the head of a character, it makes it easier for the reader to identify with that character. So that would mean, like, let's say the character's in a life and death situation. If you're in an omniscient point of view, you're going to say, and Dor Ben Habakkuk fought Keen Horton, and they had a vicious battle, and he won. Okay, I'm telling you what happened. It's really bad, really, really bad. Usually really bad, especially if the scene is pivotal to the story. What you want to do is tell the story from inside the character's head. So better would be, and Dor came to the intersection, and there he saw in front of him his dream woman, and she was running and she was panicking, and then he looked over there and he saw the enemy, and the enemy, I'm just really sorry, I'm just like giving you everything is, of course, even better than that is put the wording in there exactly how the character thinks, so that you feel like you're right in his mind. I did that in my first draft. You see, I actually started writing by learning how to write screenplays first, and I found that my screenplays sucked. My first draft of Law sucked because the dialogue just all seemed all blended together. Like, if you're a really good writer, when you write your dialogue, that is what your characters say, they're not all going to sound like the same person. They're all going to be unique to that character. Like Keen Horton might say, "Get out of the way, you I'm just going to, you bitch, because I don't give a flip what you think." Whereas another character might say, "Can you please move? I really don't want to look at you today." Or another character might say, "Ah, shit. Who's this in front of me?" Or, depends on the character. So when you create your dialogue, you have to be like an actor or actress as a good writer and get inside your character and think exactly what wording would they use, what attitude would they use, what would they be thinking. Then you got to put all that on the page, and that's good writing. I did that in my first draft, which is why Steven Spielberg, he made the movie from my first draft, okay? So he had good material to work with. I think he had to come up with his own ending, though, because my ending at Silver Skies was not good. So I bet the Silver Skies movie was very good. And I hear that Matthew McConaughey, who played the lead, won an Oscar. He got his first Oscar for that. The problem is the movie's going to be better now because I've figured out the ending. Save the Cat with Blake Snyder helped me. I was kind of like at the bad guys close-in section, and I just didn't know how to tie it up. I had writer's block for like 15 years on this book. But oh wow, after I watched Independence Day Resurgence and I saw what they were doing wrong with all their not, well, all their subplots and parallel plots that weren't working, I realized what I needed to do. I said, Gail, I don't know, I think Jesus just gave me inspiration. All of a sudden, all these ideas came to me about how to do the last quarter of the book. And I thought, wow, that's going to be brilliant. That'll make it work. Everything's going to tie together. All the loose ends are going to tie together. So basically, my ending is the Silver Skies ending, but drawn out. In other words, and what I'm going to do in Silver Skies 1996 version, I'm going to go back and use my first draft, the one that Steven Spielberg fell in love with, where the dialogue was great, where the characters definitely sounded different from each other. And I'm going to go reread my book on characters and viewpoint. I'm also going to study intensely the Myers-Briggs different personality types and determine which personality types each of my characters are. Like I've determined my Antichrist is the commander type, but he's also a sociopath or psychopath. So what I'm going to do is make the Antichrist character a blend between the commander type and a sociopath. And even I'm going to use the Myers-Briggs character types as the launching pad from which I create each character. So let's say for Brianna, who is my type, which is mediator, but you can't just go strictly by Myers-Briggs if you want your characters to come alive on the page. You can use that as your launching pad. Then you got to go back and think about the history, what your characters have been through in their life, and why they are. So basically, I'm redoing all my character sketches for all my characters. First of all, determining what Myers-Briggs personality type they are. Then from that, I create a history for each of them, and I think about, okay, with this personality type, if I had this history, what would I be like now? And what are my goals? And what are my hang-ups? And then I got to determine whether there's some mental illness involved. So I'll say, for instance, with Brianna, who's patterned very much after me, she's a mediator type, but she's got a little bit of a problem with, you might say, what's that word? Codependency, a little bit like I did, a little bit. And she's very idealistic, a little bit too idealistic, like I was in my 20s, and that's going to be one of her weaknesses. So you see where I'm going. So now once I know deeply the framework of each character, then I can create dialogue and put them in the scene. And another important thing is when you're plotting, when you're doing your plotting, even though you want to follow Save the Cat and make sure all your plot points are in order, you want to make sure that none of your characters violates who they are. Because when you do that, you're going to lose your readers. They're going to say, oh, I can't believe anybody would be like that. And that was a little bit of a problem that I had in the edits that I put into Silver Skies. I was trying to make it all omniscient voice because I was trying to make my point of view consistent, and I ruined the book because then I failed to differentiate between the different characters where they all started seeming the same. And my villains started getting a little flat for that reason because characters that weren't like me, I didn't really go deep enough into who they were to really understand them and make their dialogue work. This is in the edits. My original version was pretty good because when I was a better writer in the 1990s or novel than I am now, but it's coming back to me. So I'm going back and working on the book, focusing especially on characterization, on theme, making sure that I don't make the mistake of Independence Day resurgence. And Laurie McBride's taken over Hollywood and she's really ruined it because she's such a shallow person that she doesn't understand what makes people tick down to their core. And this is reflected in her screenwriters all her characters are flat. They're all propaganda mouthpieces, and that's why Hollywood's losing money right now. I guarantee you, when my Silver Skies is done, Hollywood's going to start, at least the Steven Spielberg brand of Hollywood's going to start making money again.